Hello everybody, it is Saturday the 4th of November. It is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon here in Abingdon-on-Thames in Oxfordshire in the south of England. Abingdon is a town 7 miles due south of the city of Oxford. The former county town of the Royal County of Berkshire before the 1974 reordering of the counties. And my name is Gerard, or Peter, or Boniface. I am a crocheter and knitter, a weaver, a hope-to-be spinner, a sewer, a quilter occasionally. I try to do all things crafty, and I'm just beginning to learn about beading. So, welcome if you are tuning in for the first time, and welcome back if you're one of my almost now 200 subscribers to this channel. You're very welcome, whether you're a new or returning visitor. I hope that you enjoy spending a little time with me this afternoon. And if you do, don't forget to like this video and to subscribe if you haven't already, and you'll be advised when new videos have been uploaded. I didn't record last week I didn't record last week because on Saturday afternoon last week, I was just incredibly overcome by incredible fatigue and tiredness, and fell asleep and slept all the afternoon, all the evening, and all night. It does happen sometimes with the medication that I take that I suddenly become incredibly fatigued. So it was just a short-term issue, and I've been fine since, so no worries on the health front there. But it does mean that it's been 2 weeks since I did a last podcast, although a lot of you will have been following my Vlogtober, which finished on Tuesday, Halloween. And thank you for those of you who have supported me through the whole month of October. I have to say it was a strange feeling on Wednesday, not recording something, not thinking about what I was going to be talking about later that day, not actually getting the video out, not editing and rendering and uploading the video. So it was a slightly, having been doing it every day for 31 days, it suddenly was very strange not to be doing it again. But there we are. I had fun for most of the time with Vlogtober. It did mean, however, that there was a lot less time available for crafting, but that has improved somewhat in the last week. Although, I've always got an excuse. You know me, I always have an excuse at the ready. I have a PlayStation PS4, which I've had for the best part of 2 years now. In fact, it is 2 years, yes. And when I bought it 2 years ago, I also bought what was then a fairly new game called Shadow of Mordor, which is a very loose... It's a game that's based on the worlds created by J.R.R. Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings, and the graphical realization of the stories in the films by Peter Jackson at the beginning of the 21st century in 2000, 2001, 2002. It plays fast and loose with the canon, it has to be said. It's the storyline is... It's a good story, but it's not the Lord of the Rings story. The characters are recognisable, the worlds are recognisable, and, you know, as long as you buy into the difference, it's fine. I really enjoyed that game. It took me about 6 months to complete, because I'm not a gamer by any stretch of the imagination. And in October this year, the sequel to that game was released, Shadow of War, which is about 5 times bigger. So, I have to confess, I bought it on Wednesday and downloaded it overnight and have played it on Thursday and Friday. So that has eaten a little into my crafting time as well. But, you know, so be it. I've enjoyed the process of playing, and that's sometimes it's nice to refresh yourself before you come back with full vigour into crafting. Having said that, I've not been crafting. So I have a friend whose birthday is next week, and I've made him my star cushion. I was a little bit concerned initially that I was making the star points in a different colourway from the star body. I had only one skein of the black and white and grey, and I had 2 skeins of the purples and blues. And I didn't think I would have quite enough grey to do all of one side and then do all the other side in the blue and purple. So I thought I'd do the centre of the star, the pentagon in the centre, in the black and white on both sides, and then the star points in the purple and blue. And actually I'm quite pleased with the way it's come out. It's got an interesting vibe to it. Nothing worse than that. So that's going to be part of his present on Tuesday, I think his birthday, the 7th, yes. However, he's also been teaching his daughter to knit, and which means I've been teaching him to knit in the first place, and he's doing very well. And I bought him a skein of yarn, one of the cakes, because being the kind of person he is, although he's Pakistani British, and there is quite a strong colour palette from the subcontinent, from India, Pakistan and so on. Hello Toby, yes, it's nice to see you. He himself is fairly dour in his colour choices, so it tends to be fairly muted tones. And of course, if he's working with his daughter who is 9, I think, possibly 10, she's going to want things brighter and more vibrant and more exciting. So I'm kind of hoping to wean him into having more exciting colours in his crafting life. But I've also decided to give him the second Star Wars crochet set, because I want him to learn to start crocheting, and I think he and his daughter will enjoy making amigurumis. So I'm increasing the set. I'm giving some extra colours and some extra hooks for him as well. But no doubt I will have to teach him how to crochet so that he can teach his daughter how to crochet, and they can have fun making these figures for her brothers as well as for herself. Toby, what are you doing? Honestly, you've got yourself stuck now, haven't you? Come on. Come on. Out you come. That's right. Honestly. Silly sausage. Anyway, so as I say, I'll be augmenting what's in there, putting some extra bits and pieces of colours in for him so that he can make more of the characters. And I'll probably do that by putting them into one of the egg boxes and make it all into a kind of gift parcel together. So something I handmade for him, something for him to play with his daughter with, and something to pull him out of his comfort zone in terms of the colours. So I'm working on him. He's my work in progress in terms of becoming a crafter like me in the fibre arts. He's very much enjoying the knitting. He is an English knitter, so I think because he's been an English knitter and therefore using his right hand for the yarn, he's going to find it more of a challenge initially with crochet, because obviously the yarn is in the left hand, but I don't think he's going to struggle particularly, and we'll have a bit of fun with that. So it's quite nice to have a colleague who I'm helping to develop skills and who's helping therefore his daughter. So this is all part of the handing on of traditions and developing the next generation of crafters. So it's very much something that I think he'll enjoy, and I think his daughter will enjoy. Go on, off you go. That's a good boy. Right, so that is my finished object for today's episode. So I have actually been doing something. It's not that I've been sitting around playing games and ignoring my crafts. So yeah, I was really quite pleased with the way this turned out. I not quite stuffed one of the arms properly, so I think I just need to transfer a bit of the stuffing up into the star point a little. But I don't like overstuffing cushions anyway. I think you don't want the polyfill to be peeping through the gaps very much. And it's less noticeable for the middle part, but it would be very noticeable on the points. But it's quite possible to just move things around and even things out. So yeah, I'm really very pleased with that. And it's an acrylic yarn, so he'll be able to machine wash this without any difficulty. And the polyfill inside will machine wash quite happily as well. So nice simple care. In terms of works in progress, I've started another project. I know, but it's a sensible start. It's a good project for started, and I will just grab the pattern. It really was because I loved the yarn that I bought the pattern. I was in Mason's and I saw this lovely Flutterbee, James C. Brett Flutterbee Chunky, which is, I think it's a, yeah, it's 100% polyester. It's a very chenille type feel to it, so it's very soft and almost frictionless as you rub across it. It's got that lovely super soft feel, and I've got it in three different colours. I've got pink, brown, and grey, kind of greyish green blue. It's grey, but it's got bluish green undertones. And do they have colour names? No, they don't. So it's colour 629. That's 629. Sorry, B29. I should put the light on. I could see better. And colour B18 is the beige. Oh no, it has got a colour name. The beige has got a colour name beige. There we go. And the pink has a colour name pink. How very exciting. The grey doesn't have a colour name, but we'll call it grey because it is. So I've got these three. I've got 2 balls of each. Hello, Toby. Yes, I'm in the middle of podcasting. And the pattern I got to go with it is this. It is either I think that's a cardigan. Yes, it is. The top one is a cardigan. The bottom one is a jumper with just a couple of buttons on. Sorry, the lights is... There we are. And I'm making the bottom one. I quite like this. So I've started already. And because of the nature of the yarn, because it's a chunky yarn, it's producing this lovely knit ridge without actually... I mean, it's just stocking out, so it's just knit one-way purl the back, and it's really not difficult at all, with a 2x2 rib right at the very bottom, and it naturally produces this almost striped, vertical striped pattern within the stitching. So, yeah, I'm enjoying that. I've cast on. This is the back panel for the first one in the grey. I'm part way through it. I did probably a couple of hours while I was watching some mindless nonsense. Oh, it's The Walking Dead. Will you stop it? Go on, off. I'm sorry about this. He's in a very funny mood today. He normally doesn't try to eat my yarn, but today he's cruising for a bruising, as we used to say. Not that I ever would, but you know. So yes, it's as you can see, all pearl bumps on the back, and I will be making 3 of these for my niece and great nephew rather, and for my friend's baby that's due in January. I'm making them all in the 6 to 12 month size, 6 to 9 month size, I think it is actually. Where are we? Doesn't actually say the month size, it's just to fit the chest size. But I'm making the largest size in each. Sorry, I've got a bit of fluff in my mouth there now. I'm making the largest size in each because they'll be able to wear them when they're a little bit older. I find with newborn babies that lots of people buy newborn baby clothes, which is great, but very few people then keep that up and buy the larger clothes size. And so I focus on making the larger clothes size. It also gives me a bit of time to get them made, because obviously if I was making newborn baby stuff, by the time I finished it'll be far too late. So I've started that and I'm enjoying that. I'm using plastic needles, pony plastic needles. They're very cheap, they're very bendy, they're straight needles. Not quite sure why I decided to use straight needles. I'm not really enjoying these. And there's nothing wrong with the needles themselves, although they are quite bendy, which perturbs me not a little. I'm used to steel or aluminium needles that don't bend as much. There's a lot of drag. I have to, it takes a little, not massively more, but a little bit more effort to get the stitches off the left needle onto the right needle. So yeah, I mean, they're only cheap. They were a couple of pounds. Unfortunately, that huge quantity of needles that my mother gave me, and she didn't have a single set of 6mm needles. 6.5, 5.5, but not 6mm, and the pattern calls for 6mm needles, so I had to buy some. As I say, I don't really know why I didn't use my metal circulars, but anyway, I'm using these, and they're fine. I mean, they do the job. I'm not over enamoured, but it's more a choice of the materials than anything that's intrinsically wrong with the needles themselves, but I just thought I'd share that with you. Other works in progress, well, they are where they were, really. Have I done anything else? I don't think I have actually moved anything on. No, I haven't. Nothing else that I have been working on has moved on substantially from where I was. Oh, I've done 2 of these panels now for the hood of the hooded cape. So these will be stitched together and the body part made. So yes, I suppose that is. I mean, this I really like the stitch pattern on this. It's not difficult at all. It is basically 2 double crochets, 2 treble crochets, 2 double crochets, depending which terminology. This is Jada, so she calls them double crochets, so I'll call them double crochets. So it's 2 double crochets into 1 stitch and then skip a stitch, and that's basically the pattern. And it means that you keep a fairly standard, well, you keep the same stitch count going across, but you just get this slight V shape in the stitches. So I'm really quite pleased with it. The colours are lovely, and it is where it is, so it's going well. Hello, Bunty. Have you come to say hello now as well? So those are my works in progress. I have another item. Well, I have 2 items. These aren't things I'm going to make immediately, but they're things that I would like to make. So I'll just talk a little bit about them. I have a friend at work, and she is a big Doctor Who fan, modern Doctor Who fan. She's Polish herself, although she's lived in the UK for a number of years now, and is pretty much settled here as well, as is her family. But she really loves new Doctor Who. She really loves David Tennant, if truth be told. And by love, I don't just mean she enjoys watching him. She really is quite infatuated with him. So I thought I would, at some point, for her, make these police box socks. This was a free pattern on Ravelry, I think. I think this one was a free pattern. It comes with a chart for the tops of the socks, which is there. You know, I mean, it's a nice idea. I think it uses slips. From the look of it, it looks as though it uses slip stitches to create the kind of panelling effect for the door, the TARDIS doors, which is what this is. So for those of you who don't know Doctor Who, the TARDIS is the Doctor's time and space machine, but it looks like a Metropolitan Police Service telephone call box from the 1950s, and they have wooden panels with a light on the top with a telephone inside, and where assistance could be called in the days before mobile telephony and walkie-talkie radio systems and all that kind of thing, where the only communication that police had was either using their whistle or these telephone boxes that were standing on every other street corner. And it's very much a Metropolitan Police telephone box, because other police forces also had telephone boxes, but they looked different depending which police force they were in. So this isn't a massive project, because the base of the socks is just knitting in the round. And in fact, I think I could even do that on the knitting machine, and then just, instead of doing the full tube, just do the tube as far as the heel, and then pick up the stitches on from the knitting machine. So that will be something I want to make, but I don't have any plans immediately for that. I've got other things I want to get off the needles and get out of the project bags before I do that. And with the baby knitting as well, I want to get that. I want to break the back of that, as it were. I want to get that underway and get it really finished. So, something that I really would like to make sooner rather than later, but I probably won't make it this year and will want to make it next year, is I have an advent calendar which is a material calendar with little pockets in, that was made for me by Wendy 3 or 4 years ago now, I think it was. And I made my mother and brother one for their Christmas advent preparations this year. And I quite like those crafted advent calendars. They're a little bit more personal. There's a little bit more of the person in the item, because rather than simply a bought one, which is fine, but it's nice for crafters to receive and to give crafted items, I think. So I saw this and fell in love with it, really. So I may make this. These are lots of different Fair Isle socks in 2 colours, using red and white. So it's a very Christmassy combination, but there's no reason it has to be red and white. It could be red and green, it could be green and gold, it could be red and gold, it could be royal blue and cream, anything like that, royal blue and silver even. So I think I quite like the idea of doing this, and it may be one of those projects that, because you've got to make 24 if you want to do it as an advent bunting, as it were, then it's one of those things where you could do 2 a month. They're only small, so it shouldn't take more than an evening, really, to get through most of the knitting required. And I think once you build up a head of steam, you may even want to, give a week over to making 2 or 3 of them. So 2 or 3 of the pairs, that is. So I'm not in a, this isn't going to be done for this year, and I have no intention of doing it for this year, but it is something I thought I want to do some colour work, and I think learning colour work on something small, where if it all goes terribly wrong, it's not going to make any big difference to the amount of work you've already put into an item before the colour work starts. Because as you can see, the bottom parts of the socks are just plain knit. The toes and heels are in contrast colour to the main body, as are the cuff, in fact. Although, no, actually, the cuff is all red, isn't it, on every pair, just looking at that, which produces the uniformity for the top of the item. So I quite like the idea of doing this. I haven't really followed colour charts, so there are a number of colour charts for the different decorations there. And, I mean, I can't imagine it's that difficult. It's more involved rather than difficult, I suspect, that you have to concentrate, you have to follow where you are in the pattern and understand how to do the floats at the back. And because they're novelty socks, of course, they're never going to be worn, so the fact of floats along the back is not going to be an issue in any way, because no one's going to snag their feet putting them on, kind of thing. So those are 2 projects that I'm looking at. I remember Claudia did a kind of massive dump, if you like, of all the different patterns that she's interested in, and talks about the patterns that people recommend. And sometimes it's nice to get those ideas from other people and to show the kind of things that you're looking at. They may actually never see the light of day, and let's face it, We all have stacks of patterns that we've printed out or that we've bought or that we've got from magazines or wherever, and they pile up and they pile up and they pile up, and we know deep down in our hearts we are never going to make 3/4 of these things. But it's nice to show people what you're thinking about. It's nice to share ideas on whether or not other people have made similar patterns or even that pattern, and therefore whether they've got hints or tips, whether they can recommend that you do it or that you don't touch it with a barge pole. Excuse me a second, I just need to sneeze. Sorry about that. I've not got a cold. There's nothing. I'm not unwell or anything like that. I was out earlier with Wendy, which I'll talk about shortly, and I got some dust up my nose, and I seem to have had this kind of itch, almost like hay fever, but I mean it's the 4th of November and it's cold outside, so there isn't anything to be hay feverish with, as it were. I am allergic to cats, by the way. I've never mentioned this, but I'm actually allergic to cats, which is why I have 2 of them, because, you know, why not? I mean, I ask you. I'm not too bad with these 2. I think you develop some kind of tolerance, I guess. And I do occasionally have breathing difficulties at night time, but nothing serious. I know it sounds crazy. Why does a person who is allergic to cat hair have cats? Who knows? But there you go. There we are. And when they decide to groom me, it's the saliva more than the fur, I suspect. When they groom me, I get prickles all along the skin where their tongue has been, and then have to go and wash my hands to get it off, which is probably not a bad thing to do anyway when you consider, you know, you've got cat spittle on your hands and it's not necessarily the healthiest thing to have on your hands. Anyway, enough of that aside. I live a peculiar life sometimes. I've realised this, and my mind wanders off and I lose track of where I am. So, acquisitions, that's where we are. You'll notice I've put some fairy lights up behind me, lovely coloured fairy lights, and I have some on my crafting area table opposite as well. I like Christmas lights. I like Christmas, and in fact, I like to have lights as soon as it starts getting dark. I don't think I suffer from seasonally affective disorder, but there is a clear correlation between lack of sunlight, lack of light, and depressive mood. So I don't like strong lights, so I tend to have subdued lighting in that I have lamps rather than main lights on in rooms where I sit and work, and they tend to be uplighters. I don't like direct light, as it were. So something like the fairy lights, which as you can see produce quite a lot of light on their own, but it's not heavy light, so it's a cheerful bright light. They're LEDs, they're not producing very much in the way of heat, they don't use very much electricity, and I don't have a Christmas tree, partly because I've got 2 cats, and partly because where the Christmas tree used to go, the TV now is, because I've got a fireplace where the TV used to go. It's not a real fireplace, but it's a fireplace surround, and I quite like the feeling that having a fireplace gives you, even particularly I guess, in a fairly blank box apartment type building such as the one I live in. I mean, it's very nice, but it's very plain, and everything is very square, which sounds like it's ideal, but it can be a bit boring. So having a nice fireplace and pretending you've got an open fire, you know, it's nice. Anyway, there we are. Which reminds me, I need to get a new bulb for it's a electric fire. I need to get a new bulb for it because the bulb is gone. So it's funny what you remember when you least can do anything about it. Anyway, at least these 2 have settled down now. Sorry, I'm burbling a little bit today. I really don't know why. I will talk about my other acquisitions sorry. So just to finish that off, these sparkle lights I got from Poundland, and they cost £5. And I know that sounds like a contradiction, but they do have occasional more expensive, not expensive, but more expensive than £1 items. And I thought these were well worth the £5. There's 144 lights in them, and as you can see, they're nice and bright, and they are what they are. And £5 is not very much, and it really does cheer up and brighten an otherwise dull environment. So today I went out with Wendy, and here I must blame Bob. Bob said, well, at least I can't be blamed because I'm at work today. But however, Bob, I would say that if you were not at work today, you would have gone out with Wendy, so I wouldn't have gone out. So in fact, it is your fault because you weren't there rather than because you were. I say nothing more. But Wendy and I went out because in Abingdon, in the Abbey buildings, there was a craft fair. This is an annual event, but it's just changed this year from what it used to be, and it's become slightly more compact. There are slightly fewer exhibitors, but there were more demonstrations. Now, we went right at the beginning of the day, so the demonstrations weren't actually happening, but we got to talk to one or two of the makers, probably in more detail than if we had gone later and they'd been busier and maybe doing the demonstrations. And two stalls in particular caught my eye. One was a wool felting person. I'm just sorry, I'm slightly distracted because I thought I'd put the gubbins, the flyer. Sorry, I will just pause. There we are. I had put the gubbins down. So the wool felter was a lady named Elaine Newson, and she's brilliant. There was one. She makes flat panel wool felting. She doesn't make objects, so she makes items from flat felted wool panels, or she makes pictures. And she had several pictures, and they were really very good pictures. They looked like watercolours, but in felt. And she's obviously a very capable artist in her own right, regardless of the wool felting. But she made a Lake District scene with purple hilltops and lush green dales and sheep. And the combination of the blues and the greens and the purples really appealed to my sensibilities, and the fact that there were these lovely sheep in the dales munching on the green grass. And it was beautiful. It really was. And it wasn't cheap. It wasn't very expensive. I think it was £120 for the panel, which frankly, given the amount of work that must have got into it and given the artistry involved and the fact it was a very beautiful item, I don't think is an excessive amount of money. I just didn't have the money at this time to pay for that, so I couldn't buy one. But the other thing that she does do, and she gave me a flyer, is that she runs a wool felting afternoon for beginners, which this is her flyer. And her details are on the bottom, which I think you can see on there if anyone else is interested. Obviously, she's based in Oxfordshire with the Oxford telephone number that she has. And I think I may well take part in that at some point. I've watched lots of wool felting videos and I love watching them. I don't know if I will actually be any good because I'm not really an artist. I've never, at school, I could draw but not very well. I could paint but not very well. I could sculpt things in clay but not very well. And because I don't have the basic skill set of painting or drawing or moulding things, then doing them in another substance like roving is possibly a big ask. So I don't know, but it might be fun just to have another little skill set to come in play. So I not in the near future, but I think probably in the next year, possibly in the springtime, I will be looking into going along for an afternoon and taking one of these courses. And I should say this was the flyer for the exhibition, and there were some special offers so that were included, and they gave us a map to show where they were. And it's a very nice little flyer, not flower, sorry. So we went. I'm going to put some pictures and videos in while I'm talking. They're only short, but it was an opportunity, because we'd only seen the outside of the Abbey buildings. Going inside was an opportunity to actually see the lovely vaulted wooden ceilings and the vaulted stone ceilings, and to give you a sense of what the inside of these 14th century buildings looks like. And we went into the Undercroft, and in the Undercroft was another lady called, if you bear with me, I will get her name, Elizabeth Hurst. No, sorry, she was the milliner. Angela Paulin, it looks like, Pawlyn. And she was a weaver, and she had 3 different types of weaving machines. She had a rigid heddle loom, rather like mine, but slightly smaller. She had another rigid heddle loom that had a gate, so it allowed for slightly more complicated patterns. And then she had a 4-gated rigid heddle loom, which allowed her to do really quite complex weaving patterns. And she runs a weaving class at the Ardington School of Crafts out near Wantage, which is about 15 miles to the southwest of Abingdon, about 15, maybe 20 miles in that direction. So they run literally hundreds of courses through the year in different their main areas are clay and photography, leatherwork, textile, which includes everything from weaving and spinning and sewing, how to use an overlocker, how to get the best out of your sewing machine, all these different techniques that you need to know about. There's paper, so there's origami and paper piecing, needlework, cross-stitch, jewellery, printing, so anything you can think of, really. And it's the Ardington School of Crafts, which she was telling us, has just been taken over this year by a new company, and they're trying to expand the range of what they do. So I will be going online. Their website, I'll put the details down below, but they have a website, ardington.org. And I will be looking on there because they do, and wickerwork. They do lots of basket weaving and things, just reading the back. Because there are a lot, I've thought for a while I'd like to kind of take some classes in the various areas that I'm interested in. And chatting with them, it sounds like there are some really interesting possibilities. So after we had a look around the craft fair, we went into the centre of town. We were only a 2-minute walk from there anyway, as you know from my previous tours in the Vlogtober. And we went to Mason's haberdashery, where Wendy bought some fabrics for a table runner that she's looking to make, and we chatted about different colour schemes and eventually alighted upon 3 fabrics that worked together that were going to achieve the overall effect that she wanted. I didn't buy anything. I was very good. I just helped Wendy to choose, picked out different fabrics that might work with the ones that she had highlighted, and we got there in the end. And she chose some very nice fabrics that should work very well together. And then we went to Poundland, where we got a couple of bits and pieces, nothing significant. And then, then we went to a new venue in Abingdon, which is the Willows Milkshakes, I think it's called. Willows Milkshakes, yes. Which is a new little business, whose main business, as you could probably tell by the name, is milkshakes, but they also do smoothies and coffee and that kind of thing. And it's a really lovely little place, right next door to Mason's wool shop, but we'll come back to that. And a number of my friends parents and governors at the school that I'm a governor at had posted on Facebook that they'd been with their children and it was a really lovely place. And all of the furniture is very strong, rustic, possibly Shaker, Quaker style furniture, butcher block tabletops, that kind of thing. But it's all for sale. It's all locally produced, and you can buy the furniture and they would simply get more from the suppliers. And they had, I think I counted, there were 48 different flavours for their milkshakes. And the first column was about 25 different flavours of UK-based chocolate bars. So there was the Mars bar milkshake, which I think in America is known as the Milky Way, but the Milky Way in Britain is a different confection by the Mars company. But so it's a milkshake, but it's got kind of ground up or minced up bits of the chocolate bar running through it. And so I had an Aero mint milkshake and Wendy had a Caramac milkshake, and they were absolutely incredibly delicious. I could recall the sensations, the flavours in my mouth for a couple of hours afterwards. Not that it was repeating on me or any nonsense like that, but the experience was such a positive and intense positive experience. I could re-relish it as if I were actually enjoying it all over again. And it's very reasonably priced, and it was good to see a different kind of shop on the high street, as it were. Though it's actually in Sturt Street, not on the high street, literally. So it's nice to support local businesses, and I think I will be going there regularly. Really, not every day, because I'm large enough. Although my excuse is I'm getting older, so I need more calcium. So if I need to have a thick milkshake with chocolate bars minced up, they do a Reese's cup. And I love Reese's cups. I very nearly had it, but I wanted to play safe because I didn't know what they would be like as milkshakes. So I went for the Aero Mint, which is my favourite chocolate bar. For those of you who may not be familiar with Aero, it has lots of little bubbles within the middle of the confection, and then is covered with milk chocolate, and they come in chocolate flavoured bubbles and orange flavoured bubbles and mint flavoured bubbles, and the mint Aero bar is by far and away my favourite chocolate bar. I mean, I love all chocolate, don't get me wrong, I'll eat anything, but if I was asked which is your favourite, that would be it. So, and I knew that I would be safe with Aero because at least it's mint, and if it was just mint and chocolate, but it actually the milkshake tasted like an Aero bar. It was amazing. It was delicious. It was a really nice atmosphere. Families were in there. It's not a very big place, but that makes it all the more special to sit in and just enjoy company. So having been in there, and as I've already mentioned, it was next door to Mason's wool shop. So we went into Mason's wool shop. And I wanted some wool, some yarn for a granny square that Jada released on Friday. Jada and Stitches, the owl. She's doing a 12-month blanket, a calendar blanket, and November's square in this blanket was an owl. And I thought it was the most delightful, appealing owl. I don't know if I'm going to make the whole blanket. I had thought about it over the year, and I know you're supposed to make one each month and so on and so forth, but, that was never going to happen. But I really like this owl. And she did two flavours, as it were. She did a kind of reddish-brown one and a grey-blue one. One for November in the southern part of the north, if you like, where it's all the colours are a little bit richer, it's a little bit warmer, and then the grey, colder owl for the northern part of the northern hemisphere, where, like Canada, where things are very cold very quickly at this time of year. And I wanted to make I like autumnal colours, as I mentioned in my tour of the Whittenham clumps. I love those purples and the burnished copper almost, and so that became the colour scheme that I wanted. So this will be the main body, the main colour of the owl, and this will be the highlights for the wings and the belly. And I had previously bought these are Stylecraft Special. It's 100% acrylic. I love Stylecraft acrylic. For me, this is my go-to basic yarn. If I need to do something and I'm not sure if the person I'm making it for can tolerate wool or would know how to care for wool, then I will use Stylecraft Special. It's £2 a ball at Mason's, and it's 100 grams, and that's very, very good value for money. For things like amigurumi and the like, it cannot be beaten. I made the mermaid's tails out of this, 2 strands of this held together. I love that they've got lots and lots of different colours, so you can get good combinations of colours within the same yarn. And I cannot recommend Stylecraft Special highly enough. I really, really enjoy using it. So this is going to be the owl, and the owl needs a background, and Jada suggested mustard yellow, and I like the idea of mustard yellow, but I couldn't find any mustard yellow. They only had bright yellows, sunshine yellows, and that would be the wrong vibe, really, particularly with these. So this is copper, and this is spice, and this reminds me of the orange that gets studded with cloves, and you add cinnamon and put it into your wine to make mulled wine, and it has that kind of wintry, spicy look to it. I hope you're getting a good colour representation. I've got some lighting behind the camera, which should be, I mean, from what I can tell from the screen, it looks like the same colours that I'm seeing with my eyes, so I'm hoping that when it's actually been rendered, it still retains that. But these are lovely colours. And I also wanted to make some gingerbread men ornaments for friends, because I make gingerbread men. In fact, I make curry bread men as well, where instead of using ginger in the cookie dough mixture, I use garam masala, so it has cloves and chili, and it's a little bit more kick to it. It's only a mild, no, I use a medium madras, because I think you can tolerate a little bit of heat in sweet things anyway, because the sweetness helps to counteract the spiciness, so you need to up the spice intake a little bit. And they're very popular, people love them. So I have 2 different types of gingerbread that I make at Christmas, and so I wanted to reflect that, and so I got these 2 browns. This one is actually called gold, and this one is caramel, and actually that's quite a good, so this I think would be my gingerbread, and this would be my curry bread then. What I really wanted was a colour halfway between the 2, and I couldn't find one, because this is a bit pale for the colour that my gingerbread actually come out, and this is a little bit dark for the colour that the curry bread men come out. It's something part way between the 2, but I think either of them is going to look good, and I will use white for things like the eyes and maybe the edging to give the sensation of icing around the edge. So those are little projects that I have in mind. I've seen a couple of patterns for gingerbread men, so on Ravelry. I haven't decided which one I'm going to use yet, but they will be crocheted, and I will obviously keep you informed about those. And I just, as I said, I cannot talk highly enough about Stylecraft Special. This is their DK. And just look at those colours. They actually all go together anyway. So yes, sorry, to finish the thoughts, if you like. I thought with that combination, I could go with a very pale outer border, or I might go with the golden outer border, and I think either of them is going to work well. I think probably I'm tending more towards the gold than the paler caramel colour. I think that triple combination, and possibly use the caramel as the inner ring for the belly, which has to be a kind of creamier colour. So in fact all 4 colours will be used there. I watched the video, and you need slightly larger amounts of this, but it's scrap amounts of the highlight colours. So look, don't know what that was. Do you know what that was, Bunty? I don't know what that was either. It sounded like my phone receiving a message, possibly. It could be my work phone. So that should have been it. That should have been it. But we walked into the shop, and I said to Wendy before we went in, I like to pop in because there are always new products available, and it's just nice to know what is there. Well, I knew I wanted the Starcraft stuff because I'd seen the Jada and Stitches video yesterday, and so I knew I wanted those oranges, the reddish browns. Right in front of you as you walk in, they have their display of the latest items that they haven't had before. And there was a series of Katia Warmies, which is this. This is a mixed fibre yarn. It is quite precisely 67% acrylic, so it's 2/3 acrylic. 18% wool and 15% polyester. That's 33, yes, that's right. So it's an acrylic polyester wool mix. It's incredibly soft, incredibly soft. On the band is a knitted pattern for a throw, and there is enough yarn in this ball of wool to... See, Wendy, I do call it a ball sometimes, not just a skein. There is enough in this skein ball to make a throw, and I just love the colours in this. Absolutely love them. So actually it's quite a nice hand muff as well. I can't wait to get going with this. It's I'll just show you it's tightly wound, tightly spun rather, but it's got a lot of fibres coming up off it. So in fact it uses quite large needles. It's a size 6mm needle it uses. 7mm needles it uses, which given the thickness of the yarn is actually very, very big needles, but clearly it's to make this rather drapey effect. And with all the halo that this yarn has around it, it's going to... I don't think you're going to notice that it's actually quite loosely knit. So I'm really interested to get this done. I chose these colours because I have, you've probably seen in other videos that I've made, I have a gentleman's club kind of green leather sofa, and I think these colours will set that off really very nicely. So it'll be a nice throw to have over the back of the sofa and just be able to put it over your lap if it gets a bit chilly while you're watching TV, that kind of thing. So it's not cheap. There are 250 grams here, I think, is the... Yes, 250 grams. But there's 700 metres of yarn, which is more than enough for a throw. And it was about £15, £16 it was, for the wool. So it's not cheap, but actually that's also not that expensive. It's because of the high acrylic and polyester content, it is made affordable, and the wool has been applied in such a way as to make the most of its presence. So although there's only 18% of wool in this, it actually feels like wool in your hands because of the huge halo around the twist of the yarn. So I didn't need it, but I saw it and I thought I'd get it and I'd talk about it, and I obviously will let you know how it's progressing once I cast it on. I think that it's garter stitch to cast on. The first 6 rows is garter stitch, and then there is a fixed repeat pattern. There's a chart to follow, and I think once I'm in to making this, it's one of those projects which I will pick up and do a little bit and then put down, and pick up and do a little bit and then put down. But I will talk about how this feels knitting up, and any insights I get whilst using it. So that's my other acquisition. In the post, my Knitting and Crochet magazine arrived. I just love those penguins. I think I'm going to have to make them. Lots of different patterns in here, lots of Christmas patterns in here, as you'd expect. And there is a lovely snowman family that can be made, which is delightful. So I've not really looked at this yet. It only arrived yesterday. But they've even got a whole Christmas nativity scene that can be created. So I've got another Christmas nativity scene, but this one I think is crochet, whereas the other one was knitting. Yes, this one is a crochet nativity scene. So I think that might be the one I actually do. They started part 1 in the last issue, and it's got part 2 in this issue. So I loved this magazine because it's just full and full and full of patterns and things to make. But it does have a little bit of talking to creators, talking to designers. So it's not just a pattern magazine. There is actually some interest in reading the contents. So that's arrived. And the other big acquisition that arrived is the latest edition of Rib magazine, part 3. Really pleased with this. Love the sweater on the cover, by the way. It's called the sweater that he's modelling is there, and it's called The Alchemy, which is the name of the whole magazine. It's the Alchemy pullover, and it uses, I think, 7 colours in the yoke, although they have an alternative 4-colour pattern. And I love all the items in here, and I could make them all. Of course I won't make them all, because I mean, who has the time if nothing else? But I just love this magazine. I like the fact it's written by men and for men, and he's very much aimed at the masculine market rather than magazines like that, which are fine but are much more aimed at the major constituency, which is women. And even to giving you the recipe for a cocktail at the end, which is the Old Fashioned, which is basically bourbon with Angostura bitters and fruit peel in it, which sounds delicious, and I think I might well make myself one. It's a lovely wintry warming drink, that one. So that was it really for my acquisitions, which, I mean, well, I mean, I was going to make some kind of nonsensical statements. Well, it's not too bad, but you know, it really is. But hey, what can you do? That's life. So recommendations. Well, Wendy has already told me off because she can't stop playing word cookies. So sorry about that. If any of the rest of you followed my app recommendations for the mindlessness, filling the 5 minutes when you're on a bus or whatever it happens to be that you're doing, that means that you've got 5 minutes spare on your hands, which can end up becoming half an hour because they're compulsive games. Not really addictive games. I mean, I mentioned them being addictive last time, but in fact they are compulsive games. Once you start playing them, you have to keep playing them. But anyway, sorry about that. But I'm not talking about apps today. I've talked about PlayStation. So for those of you who are interested in open adventure style gaming, I can recommend both Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. They are eminently playable games, even by a non-gamer like myself. There's lots of interest. The worlds that they create are quite daunting but exciting at the same time. I'm currently watching The Walking Dead, and I'm not over enamoured of this season so far. Whereas last season it seemed to drag on and drag on and drag on with quite detailed character-filled storylines and individual character storylines. This season, episode 2, I'm afraid I tuned out for most of the episode because it was just a dozen different ways to fire guns at each other, which I know that they have a wide range of audiences, and I'm being very unfair with that characterization. There was some element of drama within the program, particularly the final scenes, but there were large swathes of the program which were just battle scenes, and that's fine because they had to happen, but it was a little bit mindless, a little bit dull for me. It wasn't my ideal episode. I'm sure that other episodes this season will be more... I'll have more affinity with them, more to my liking. So I'm sticking with it. Strictly is Strictly, and I love Strictly, and I love everyone on Strictly, so that's okay. And it's good mindless entertainment to craft by, which is okay as well. I haven't caught up with Riverdale yet, season 2, so I can't speak to that. I am just watching, actually, before this episode, rewatching The Exorcist movie from way back when, which is actually still quite an interesting movie. There is an interesting tension in the movie. It's written by William Blatty, I want to say. I may have got that wrong. Anyway, who is not himself a Catholic. And there is a great deal of cynicism about exorcism. Being a medieval, one of the priests in the story is asked, are there exorcisms? Can I have an exorcism? Well, only if you go have a time machine to go back to the 16th century, is the rather pert and not very helpful response. I'm watching this coincidentally, and it is a coincidence, I've been watching it in the same week that the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, which is the bishops' conference for the US Church, have published an English language translation of the Rite of Exorcism. It's only available with the bishop's permission. You can't buy a copy. Even a priest can't buy a copy. You can only buy it if your bishop gives you permission to buy it. And so it's only available to those people who will be authorized exorcists. And at the same time, they have released a prayer book for people who might feel that they are at risk of or have been subject to demonic presence, not necessarily possession, but presence in their lives. And it's an interesting subject matter, really, because if you talk about devils and demons and so on, and exorcisms, there is that natural cynicism of a rational age, which says, well, yeah, we don't believe in those things anymore. Things like witches and goblins and werewolves and vampires and demons and devils all fall into that kind of category. And in one sense, of course, we don't believe in that kind of thing anymore. But not believing in something is not the same thing as something not existing. And this is by way of introduction to a recommendation. There is a series of... Well, there was a book released by C.S. Lewis. I was going to say Lewis Carroll then. I don't mean Alice. By C.S. Lewis, called the Screwtape Letters. And Screwtape is a devil, a demon, who is writing letters to his nephew, Wormwood, who is Wormwood? Wormwood. Yes, I was going to say Wormtongue, but he is a character in The Lord of the Rings, and that's why I was getting slightly confused in my head. And C.S. Lewis, in his introduction to the book, and he maintains this pretense that these are real letters between an uncle to his nephew who was just beginning out in the demon occupation, as it were. And he points out in the introduction that there are two classical errors that people make. One is to believe that demons don't exist, and the second is to believe that if they do exist, they don't have any power anyway. And there is I'm not sure I categorise that absolutely spot on, but it's worth reading anyway. It's a while since I've read the introduction. And there were some really clever insights that Lewis had within these letters. And it's not about the kind of paranormal activity that horror films associate with demonic possession. It's about having an accurate view of yourself and the world. Jesus in the Gospel calls the devil the father of lies. And the title of the devil is Lucifer. Lucifer, the morning star, the light, but not the true light. He's the light that deceives, the light that makes you think that what you're doing is the right thing, but is actually the wrong thing. There are lots of different examples that you can have of these things. So that one of the things that C.S. Lewis shows that can be used is how you pray in the community. So if you pray with your eyes closed, so that you can more fully concentrate on the idea of God and the ideas that you're praying about, then you can actually be excluding yourself from the community of prayers around you. So the community of prayers and the community of prayers, if you like. So that's a possible deceit that the devil can introduce into you. The alternative is that you don't close your eyes, which means that you can end up not really focusing and just thinking that the world that you can see around you is the only world that exists and the only world that's important. So that can also be used to deceive you. And in one sense, you become almost despairing. Is there anything that can't be used to deceive me? And in a sense, no, there isn't, because it's about knowing and understanding how what you're doing is true. And by true, I don't mean correct in the sense of this is right and that is wrong, but in the sense that it is the right way. In the same way that a line is true, it's fully square, it's absolutely where it's supposed to be, not that it is telling a lie in that sense, or misleading. And one of the things, I read a few blogs, not just Catholic blogs, but church-related blogs online, and there was one article by a mother of toddler who belongs to a parish where there is a person who sits in a pew near where her family sits at Mass, and he insists that she should not be bringing her children to the main Sunday liturgy because it's disrespectful and they're disruptive and he can't pray and this is getting in the way of other people's access to the sacraments and they're too young to understand and, blah, 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 blah. And she does a really good job of demonstrating why this person is fundamentally wrong. And is fundamentally wrong in a number of fundamental areas. It's not fundamentally wrong about one thing. Every aspect of their argument is simply fundamentally wrong. They're wrong in the sense that anyone should be excluded through lack of understanding. They're wrong in the sense that anybody should feel that the presence of another person somehow limits the efficacy of sacraments and the action of God in their lives. They're wrong in the sense that the efficacy of the sacraments is only there if I go away feeling good about what I've just experienced. The truth is, ennui can strike anybody, even about the most spectacular liturgy. You know, I was a professional liturgist, if you like. I did liturgy every day professionally as a monk. And there were many, many occasions, as there still are, when really I could not bear to be there. I just do not want to do this. I don't want to be there. It's boring. It's not. But I was there anyway, because the being part of the community of prayer and prayers is that you are supported by the praying and the prayers of your community. And you, in turn, by being present and participating, are supporting others who may have their moments of ennui. And ennui is called akidia in Greek philosophy surrounding monastic practice. And it's also sometimes known as the noontime demon, or the noontime devil, because it strikes in the middle of the day. It's not the night terrors that you get, or the half sleepiness and the half awakeness. It's when you're fully awake and really just fed up with what you've got to do that day. And there's a very poetic expression of your enemy, the devil, is prowling like a lion, seeking whom he may devour. And so our protectiveness of each other, of ourselves and of each other, is to be part of the community. And that will include the future community, or actually the present community, but the present community for the future as well. Our children. And if we exclude our children from our liturgies and from our faith practices, then where is their faith practice going to develop? How are they going to feel part of a community if they're excluded because, you know, it's not right that they're there and they can't understand, and so they shouldn't be present? It just doesn't hang together as an idea. Anyway, as I say, she had some very good, strong, positive suggestions, but she also said, you know, if that prayer community cannot accept the presence of children, then you need to do as the disciples were instructed: shake the dust off your feet and go to the next village, go to the next church where you will be accepted. The community of prayer, leave that community that can't accept, and explain why you're leaving. And you know, if they don't take the necessary corrective action, then they are being deceived, and maybe they do need an exorcism, not necessarily of the possession rite, but you know, the basic exorcism of getting rid of the deceptions, the deception of holiness that they suffer from. So anyway, that was a bit of a ramble around, and I know some of you like these rambles, so I'm not worried that it's not necessarily a coherent, cogent thought that's hanging together. But my response to things like The Exorcist, given that it was written by and starred people who don't have, self-consciously were not part of the faith community that they were portraying, in a sense, there is a need to accept that we deceive ourselves. Whether you want to accept that there are demons or not, we deceive ourselves. We deceive ourselves into thinking we're better than we are. We deceive ourselves into thinking that we're worse than we are. We need to learn to accept the reality, the truth, to ignore the deceptions, whether they are demonic, whether they are merely psychological deceptions emanating from our own subconscious. However you want to view the world, I think there are lessons about how easily we can be misled by the false light. So I'll leave that there as a thought for you. I have another recommendation though. I'm aware that the video is running on a little. As a result of doing all my tours, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, I've rediscovered a book that I bought a number of years ago and I read at the time, but I thought I picked it up and started reading it again. It's really, really interesting. And so if you can get a copy of this, it's called The House of Godwin, The History of a Dynasty by Emma Mason. This was the there we are. Sorry, the light was reflecting then. This was the dust jacket. When I bought the book, it was published. When was it published? It's not a huge long time ago. It was published in 2004. It was a huge time ago. It's 13 years ago. It's funny, isn't it? It just sometimes feels like yesterday, and it's 13 years ago. Anyway, it's a very good book. The House of Godwin, Harold, the last king of England who wasn't a Norman, Harold Godwinson, should tell you that this is the history of the ruling house of Anglo-Saxons at the end of the Anglo-Saxon period, and obviously, ultimately, the failed House of Godwin. But Harold Godwinson was not the only Godwin son, or Godwin daughter for that matter. And it's a really interestingly well put together book, dealing with a period of history where there isn't a huge amount of documentary evidence, even less because the Godwins were eventually on the losing side of history, and therefore the chroniclers who came after the Norman conquest, although there were one or two of them, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle in particular stands out as the kind of pro, as the name would suggest, Anglo-Saxon world. Most of the monks in the later centuries leading into the High Middle Ages were Norman or Norman sympathisers, or understood that their benefactors were Normans, and so most of the histories are always written by the victors. It's one of the basic lessons of modern history, which we understand only too well. But it's a very well written book. Really recommend this. I have been toying with the idea of a couple of short stories surrounding medieval monastic thought, and I'm nothing concrete. I've got ideas, nothing more than ideas at the moment, but I am going to be writing some short stories, and maybe even fleshing them out into a larger novella kind of writing, not a novel as such. And I will be doing a lot more research about Abingdon Abbey and the refounding of Abingdon in the 10th century by St Ethelwold, and part of that English Benedictine reform movement that I've talked about a couple of times in my vlogs about Abingdon Abbey. So I'll keep you abreast of any developments there. Obviously, that's a longer term project, and is part of what I was saying in my Vlogtober casts, that the process has actually helped me to build a few ideas about how I could develop my creative passions going forward. I did mention in the Vlogtober as well that I would be willing to organise a virtual craft night. I've had one person mention that, so the idea is just out there at the moment. I don't have anything concrete put together, but I'm more than happy to organise something if it's something that people would like to take part in. So I'll leave that with you as an idea. Thank you, Toby. Get your tail out of my nose. You're such a lovely boy. So I think that's it for today. I talked for over an hour, and I brought you up to date with where things are, so I will look forward to speaking to you all again soon. And so until next week, stay healthy, stay well, stay safe, and happy crafting, and I will speak to you all again soon. So for now, bye bye.